everyone's got a story to tell, everyone's got a great idea, you know, experiment, you know, and if you and a few people are finding this game really fun, then I'm sure, like Chris says, that niche audience will be there. We founded the company way back in 2008, and how I got into that, I guess, from my graduate course, I was doing web design. And way back then, there was kind of a thing called Flash, and I was making a lot of Flash games for advertising companies, for, you know, if someone wanted to promote their brand, a little game you could play online was quite, was part of the sales pitch. So doing that, I was also with my business partner, Luke. He was also in a similar career, sort of making these Flash games, and we just you know, we enjoyed doing this, but we wanted to strike out on our own. So we carried on making games for clients, but in the background we were kind of making our own game, and even at that time we were making it, not sure what we were going to do with it, but we just felt like it would be a really, like, we wanted to make games slightly differently. A lot of our games have handcrafted elements, and so while making these client-based games, we made a game called Loom, which was all made by paper and craft, with an animated character running around. We filmed it in a friend's bedroom, really, really low budget, really low scale. And when we did that, we then decided to, let's just put it on Steam and see what happens. Back then, Steam, you know, only had a handful of indie games, and we were lucky enough in around that, like 2010, 2011 kind of first independent game companies to be in that bunch. And so Loom went on to kind of pay for itself and more, and gave us this independence that we didn't know we could do. We can make a game in this small studio, and we can launch it.
I started in the industry back in '96. I'd always wanted to work in games, so I managed to land a job in a what we would now call a little indie company straight out of university. And that gave me a leg up to get a job at EA for a couple of years. I worked at Intelligent Games, and then round about the millennium, I settled down at Traveller's Tales just before they released the first Lego Star Wars. So over the next 15 years or so, I worked on most of the Lego series, and up until the point where we finally did Lego Dimensions. I spent a lot of time working on the Doctor Who elements of Lego Dimensions, and then I felt I'd peaked, so set up my company, Quantum Soup Studios, in 2016, and it's been an interesting experience, a little bit rocky. My original game, I couldn't manage to find a publisher for, so we had to pivot to do a bit of work for hire. And then our current project, which I'm gonna have to be cagey about because it's unannounced. Our current project is a licensed game that I did manage to get a publisher for. So it's been a little bit of a windy road to where we are today, but we're currently working on a licensed game with a big IP for families, which I'm very excited about.
What do you think were the benefits of striking out and starting on your own? What was the difference between working for your own studio and working for another agency like TT or EA?
Yeah, it's swings and roundabouts. There are pros and cons. My lead at TT had run a company for a while, and unfortunately it had, through like no fault of his, it had failed. I'd never experienced that, so I'd only had that laser focus, and I was keen to have a chance to make more creative decisions. So I was quite excited to be able to go sort of like, right, this is the thing that that I want to do. That also was a bit of a learning experience, because the first thing that I wanted to do was a bit quirky, and B, a bit too ambitious, and as a result, I couldn't land a deal for that one. So I had to pivot and do things differently for a little bit, and that was a little bit of a difficult time, because it made me question some of my decisions. But I feel like I was able to turn it around. So this project feels like it's a much better bet commercially than that original one. I want to go back to that original one because I still think that it's got legs, but it's something that I think that I'm probably going to have to put some of my own money into rather than trying to pitch it to somebody else.
Benefits were again, and Chris has sort of touched on this, the creative freedom you have with creating your own project, and whatever happens, it's on you. I mean, it's tough, and I always think the beginning of a game process is very exciting, and you think, but getting a game over the line and published, and you've got scheduling issues, you've got HR issues, you've got, is this even a good idea anymore issues, that's really tough, and it can be very stressful, and you always need to kind of make sure you're looking after yourself and your team, and that's really tough. We self-publish as well, so we're not even relying on a publisher for our games. I mean, that kind of freedom, and I think with the knowledge and the doing it for 15 years, we hope we know how to make a state of play game and how to get it done. So it's a really exciting, that kind of, hey, I want to tell a story and I want an audience to see it. So yeah, that was a real benefit for us.
I'm going to start with Chris on this, and if it's not too brutal a question, what does it cost to set up on your own? Do you need a savings pot? Do you think you have to have a day job? I'm sure you don't, because you didn't.
I think one of the mistakes that I made was that I was a little bit too ambitious early on. I was targeting sort of like projects that would like have a budget of about $500,000, and that sits in a weird no man's land between like micro indie games where publishers are quite happy to throw sort of like 50 grand or 100 grand at like a solo developer who's got a really cool, quirky project, because that's pocket change to them. But once you get up to the like $500,000 to $1 million, that gets into the range where it's still a cheap project in the scheme of things. It sounds like a lot. It goes in no time. They're not really interested until you get up to the sort of like 6 to 10 million budget, where you then need sort of like a big team, and that's complicated. I tried to go into that sort of like the middle of that no man's land, because I didn't really have a lot of experience with project budgets. That felt like it would be a comfortable sort of like team size and budget size for me at the time, but it didn't really fit with what publishers were looking for. And also it carried a bit of a risk, because I was trying to go from sort of like full-time employment to full-time employment, and I needed to have some sort of budget in place. I think it's probably smarter to do it the way that Katherine has done it, which is like starting with something that was sort of like a working business first, and then sort of like transitioning it into something more creative gradually without taking such a big risk. I don't know if you agree with that, Kath.
I don't know if we've done it the right way or not. Someone else tell us, but yeah, I mean, again, like I mentioned before, like I guess generally as a company we've been quite risk averse, and quite early on I've got an excellent mentor in the industry who's a veteran kind of games developer, and he just turned to me and went, keep your overheads low. And it's probably the best piece of advice someone's ever given me, because basically, yeah, each project we're teams of 2, if that goes well, we're team of 4, if that, so we've scaled up in a very manageable way, and we haven't relied on publisher money. It's been our own money, but then again, the profits have all been our own money. So yeah, we've really scaled up that way, and it seems to have worked for us.
It actually leads us on quite nicely to the next section, which is about investors. I think that's an area that lots of budding developers feel that there's quite a lot of information about investing out there. So if you Google how to find investment, you'll be inundated with helpful articles, but it's also a bit of a mystery, because we all know that these things are quite often fortuitous. It's quite often to do with connections. It's quite often to do with someone you may have bumped to someone at GDC or something. Did you set up a vertical slice of your game and then take that round?
We've worked a lot with platforms such as Apple, and again, we've done, when we're sort of showing them the next game, we've done things like vertical slice of the game and a pitch. So that's probably how we get them interested in the game. Showing as much as you can is always great, but again, don't invest a year of your time into a game that you're then going to pitch. It's sort of getting the balance right about giving enough to get people interested, but obviously you don't want to be working for free for years on a game hoping to get some investment.
Once I started pitching games, I did find that the fact that I'd got like 20 years of experience in the industry didn't really count for very much in the context of pitching a particular game. It was all about, okay, so what's the game? Who's it for? Have you got a demo that we can play? That is all they're interested in. I suspect that sort of like my background did help sort of like kind of like gloss over a bunch of questions that they might have like asked a less experienced developer, but it certainly didn't just sort of like magically open the door, sort of like, oh, okay, you know what you're doing then, great, have some money, which is kind of what I was hoping for, and that very much did not happen. So it is, you have to show what you want to make. Vertical slices are a bit, and demos in general are a bit of a pain, because but it is so useful to build something like that so that you can show it to people and get feedback on it. So it is very satisfying to have people play your demo and go sort of like, yes, I would definitely buy that game. When's it done? And they're like, when somebody will pay us to finish it.
But the next question I'd like to ask you about is marketing and finding an audience. Gaming is an exceptionally competitive, and in some instances, and I say this with love, oversaturated market, particularly for certain games in certain subgenres. So I'd love to know how do you start with an audience and an ideal audience and work your way backwards? Do you start with the game idea and then try and hope you find an audience? How do you go about that?
I guess for us, we kind of start with the idea first. I mean, I like to think we're never just kind of making it in a vacuum of like, this is a game we want to make, don't care if anyone likes it. Obviously, you're always trying to make a game that there is an audience for, but I think you can, I think a really good tip is to be authentic to yourself. And if you are just kind of playing a numbers game of like, well, 18 to 24-year-olds like these, so we need, it's going to come out in the end result, and you're not going to enjoy making it either. A game takes a long time to make, and make sure it's something you want to wake up every morning to and make it. The biggest marketing tool for us, if I'm being really honest, is awards, and especially the BAFTA. We weren't from Lumino City. We got that before it launched on iOS. So it was on PC, won a BAFTA, and 2 months later came out on iOS. So straight away, it was BAFTA award-winning game. They kind of told its own story. Which we're incredibly grateful for. So for people starting out, I'd really recommend, if you feel like your game's good, it's always worth a shot at just entering.
I'm interested in making games. I have no particular sort of like skill at selling them. So my plan has always been to work with a publisher who knows what they're doing. Publishers have the budget and the knowledge to sort of like get a given project in front of the audience who will be interested in it. What Katherine says is right though about you don't want to go chasing a trend or something, because that is going to put you in competition with literally everybody else. If your ambition is to sort of like try to sort of like compete with Fortnite, that's a high bar to hit. So as a small company, particularly as a startup company, you're better off doing something that is a bit different. You can find a niche audience, but a niche audience is usually enough to support a small company, and you can grow from there. But actually having kind of like doing something a little bit different is a good way to be known.
There's no point trying to copy an amazing game idea that's already out there doing really well. Well, there's no point copying any game, because it's, you know, it's already out there. Everyone's got a story to tell, everyone's got a great idea, you know, experiment, you know, and if you and a few people are finding this game really fun, then I'm sure, like Chris says, that niche audience will be there.